So this is what we're going to be starting here now the next 6 weeks, is really the focus on content creation. There's not a lot of worry about whether it's a book yet or what the chapters are, things like that. It's really mostly focusing on, can you create a critical mass of content that you can structure into a book? In particular, we're going to focus on building yourselves into better storytellers. So this is sort of what we're going to be doing in this next phase, just to give you a picture of it. We're going to spend about 10 weeks here, and that's going to be the place we're going to focus a lot of our energy for the next few weeks. We're going to be focusing on first on how to use the tools that we'll need to kind of organize ourselves. We've got story inventory that we talked about last week, how to actually sort of inventory the content, the pieces you need to write and have a compelling story, incorporating the 3Ds of dialogue, description, and depth. How do you organize your story before you start? Number two, how do you use the content index? And thinking of this a lot as your sort of writing to-do list. Kind of having a list of saying, great, if Laura's ready to write something, she can look at her list and say, all right, which of these things is most compelling to me? That's sort of the way to think about your content index. And we're going to ready ourselves to be meeting our editors. The editors are going to be people that are going to give you feedback on these first drafts to make it better. The key thing to understand, and I want to sort of make this really clear, is that many people, when they think about writing a book, they get in their mindset of how we typically think about writing term papers for school. So what happens when you turn in a paper, a substantive paper, to your teacher, professor? What happened? What's the process look like? You turn it in, and what happens next? You look forward to being graded. So your paper is now graded. You get your paper back to it. What happens from there?
Depending on what grade you get.
Depending on what grade you get. But what normally happens when you get a paper back that you've done this work on?
Read it, and then nothing happens.
Exactly. You read it, and nothing happens. And that's the important thing I want you to understand, is that when you're writing these stories, I don't want you to think of these as turning in the finished paper. I want you to think about this as turning in a first draft. Now, what's going to happen on that first draft is your editor is going to actually be giving you feedback. It's very, very different. And it's one of the things that I think people wrestle and struggle with a lot of times is they get really worried to turn in something, because what normally happens when you turn it in, it's finished, right? You get the feedback back, and maybe you complain about the grade, but for the most part, it's done. These first drafts are just the first step to get feedback on it and feedback on it and feedback on it. For those of you who are familiar with a guy named Michael Crichton, he's the guy who wrote Jurassic Park. And he talked about the biggest important thing that he learned to become a more successful author was to learn that it's not about sort of writing a great book. It's about rewriting a great book. And what he says is that a lot of times the battle's with you and yourself, with the fact that you have to do 5 edits, 6 edits, 7 edits. So the important thing to understand is this process is not about writing kind of a great first draft story. It's about writing a story and getting feedback on it to make it great from there. So over the next few weeks, we're going to be talking and learning how to use 4 different writing techniques that I find many authors will use to write better stories. We're going to talk about plot writing, we're going to talk about scribe writing, nugget writing, and lastly, we'll talk about hook writing. Now, there's not a right or wrong way to write stories. They're just are ways that are common. And what most of you will figure out as you go is you'll find which are the techniques and tools that help you develop the structure you're going to use for your story. Again, writing stories is not natural for most of us. We just don't think that way or write that way. And in fact, when we do write, oftentimes we just write the way we write emails, which is a whole bunch of narrative, right? Or the way you write term papers, which is a whole bunch of facts. And so what we're going to learn how to do is really think differently about how you're actually going to write by using these techniques. So tonight we're going to focus primarily on plot writing. Now, plot writing is a technique that I found to really elevate the quality of first draft stories because it helps you give a kind of an organizational structure to it to kind of be more effective in it. So that's what we're going to sort of be focusing on tonight, is how to use plot writing. So tonight we're going to spend just a couple minutes starting out and talking about kind of story inventories. What did you learn in doing it? How did it play for you? And kind of where you're thinking about it. Then we're going to talk about how to succeed in this next phase from here. How do you actually succeed in what we're doing? And then we're going to talk about how to do plot writing. We'll talk a little bit about it at a high level, and then we're going to do a workshop to actually do it live a little bit.